Hello my friends, it's Ranger Russ from the Meigs Point Nature Center. You can see the Nature Center behind me. Unfortunately today the Nature Center is closed. We will let you know as soon as it is able to be open. But Hammonasset is open, you can visit. And today we're going to be visiting a part of Hammonasset that a lot of people just get to see at a distance. But I really recommend that you stop and take some time to visit our gardens. We don't just have one garden here at Hammonasset. We have many gardens. Some of them are small, some of them are bigger. We're going to go and visit some of the gardens today. We're going to do two programs. So today we'll visit half the gardens, and then tomorrow we will visit the other half of the gardens. So I'm going to encourage you to put up your questions and comments about the gardens as I go. Also, if you let me know where you're from, I always like to see where people are from. And if you're having fun, keep those thumbs up coming. There's somebody already from Madison watching, so I'm going to put my mask on because I'm going to be visiting the volunteers and talking to them about the garden. And I will flip the camera around so that you can see them. And we're going to head over the first section here. Maureen is going to do an introduction to the gardens. So why don't you tell us a little history of the gardens and what they're for.
Okay, thank you Russ so much for the opportunity to give you a tour of the fabulous gardens at Meigs. The gardens were started by the Madison Garden Club in the mid-1990s, and that's the original butterfly garden behind me and the pond garden. They deeded off the handling of the gardens about 2010 to the Friends of Hammonasset, and at that time we didn't have the volunteer support to really maintain the gardens, so the gardens became overgrown. In 2015 we started again with a great group of dedicated volunteers. We also partnered with the Yukon Master Gardener program, and we began the work of rehabbing the gardens. This is our 6th season in the gardens, and we not only have the 2 original gardens, we now have 10 themed gardens we've been able to expand to over the past 5 years, in addition to the small garden that's at the front of the old Nature Center. The purpose of the gardens is to educate the public about the beauty of gardening, and particularly the use of native plants. We also want to have people respect the Native American and colonial farming history of the area. We try to create beautiful spots that people can enjoy, and we want to try and provide a space for rest and reflection while you're out here in the gardens. So today you're going to tour half the gardens with members of our group. Dave and Bob are going to take you through the rain garden. Sherry is going to take you through the shade garden. Phil is going to take you through the spiral garden and the Three Sisters garden, and you're going to end up with Jennifer in the mini meadow. So enjoy the tour, have fun.
Okay, thank you Maureen. We're going to head over. I'm not seeing any questions yet. Lots of thumbs up though, so if you have any questions. Dave is going to do the first section here, and we're going to be going to the rain garden. So what is a rain garden?
Rain garden is a means of filtering water and keeping a lot of sediment and stuff out of the rivers and streams of Connecticut and every other state for that matter. It's designed to, again, filter. You start by laying a general pathway that you want the water to flow down, cover it with a fabric, like a landscape fabric, and then put a series of rocks, etc., to channel the water down and actually filter the water and not really retain a puddle or anything like that. Usually people can use either where the water comes down their street, or like an average homeowner, their garage or house has drain pipes that you can channel water down. Here we don't have any cars or anything on our driveway that's going to leave oils or pets or anything like that, so we've harnessed the water coming off the Nature Center, which is in back of us, and we started a pipe at the drain spout, the downspout, and ran 30 feet of 4-inch PVC pipe, which Ranger Russ is showing where the exit of the pipe is. and it just follows the water down and comes the rocks down and seeps itself into the soil.
Very cool. Do you have a favorite part of this garden?
The whole garden is amazing. You know, we've got a variety of flowers in here. Red maple has been planted recently. There's all sorts of great natives in here that are flourishing now because of. I'd like to say it's because of the rain garden, but the whole area has really blossomed in the last year.
Well, I know everybody wants to know what my favorite animal is. It's kind of asking you what your favorite plant is, isn't it?
I don't have a favorite plant. I like, you know, the cardinal flower is great. I've always had fun with hydrangeas. My wife can tell you that. I prune them at the wrong time of year, so she tells me to leave them alone. But yeah, it's the whole area here is just great.
All right, so Bob's going to tell us a little bit more about the rain garden, but I noticed over here there's a swallowtail butterfly. This looks like a spice bush swallowtail dancing around here. That is so cool. So this shows our garden in action, all the insects. There are all sorts of flies and bees, and this is just filled. There's a bumblebee over here. So the garden is obviously working. So Bob.
It is a habitat for birds and the insects and migrating birds and insects, dragonflies, bees. So we tried to incorporate native plants into the garden that would be well adapted. We're on a slope here, so there's really not a lot of retention, but the water does spread out when it comes off the garden, off the rain gutters. So
that leads right to this first question we have. It says, is this irrigation system for all the gardens or just the rain garden?
Well, it does irrigate the plants that are in the garden, but that's not the main purpose. It's to allow the water to go back down into the ground and slows down the rate that it would go off the land, because it really gushes when it comes off the gutters.
Yeah.
And so this slows it down and kind of takes the place. If the building wasn't here, the roof sheds the water quickly. Well, this slows it down to a slower rate. So you can do this at home as well. You don't have to have a flat area, as this demonstrates, and the water runs down sort of a serpentine dry river. It's dry today because it's not raining, but on a day when it is raining, it will mimic a wetland or watercourse, and so the plants have to tolerate both dry but wet conditions. So we've got plants here which are a surprise to me. Cardinal flower, which you can probably see the bright red in the distance, is a wetland plant, but there's no natural wetland here. So it's doing very well. It can grow in muddy, saturated soil, but we're on gravel soils right here. So it can work in your own garden. It's also related to another plant called lobelia, and they both attract hummingbirds, and these are native. If we use cultivated plants, the timing of the flowering might not match up when the insects or birds or hummingbirds are here. So we're using native plants, and I think people will get an idea that you can use native plants for beauty and diversity.
That's a really good point. The native plants are going to provide a food source that the native animals are already used to. They're active at the same times. So like you said, they're blooming at the right time, and there's less care that has to go into a native plant because this is where it grows naturally.
Right. The soils, the plants are matched to the soils that they can tolerate. We don't really fertilize. We initially watered the first season to get them established, but we're depending on nature to provide the water. So these are plants that will do very well in dry soil if you have a pure sunny spot.
And what are these yellow ones here?
These are called coreopsis, or tick seed. And the goldfinch bird, which is a bright yellow, they love these flowers.
And I'll have to say, over the last 2 weeks, I've seen 5 to 6 goldfinches at one time, all in the entire garden. They've been everywhere.
They seem to go for the yellow flowers.
Very cool.
We also have plants in here that will produce fruit. So there'll be fruits here, the bayberry and
Yep, there's some
beach
bayberry in the
plum,
back there.
the viburnum, the shadbush. They all have fruits at different times. So in the fall, some of the birds that are migrating will benefit from those particular choices that we've incorporated into this.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Now we're going to go visit our shade garden. And Sherry is going to tell us about the shade garden. So a shade garden, obviously it's in the shade, but what more can you tell us about the shade garden?
Good morning, Russ. Our shade garden actually was started a couple of years ago, and it's become a work in progress. And I think what folks need to know about a shade garden is it's often an overlooked area of their yard. And because a lot of the shade plants tend to be more pale in color, they're not quite the vibrant colors of some of the sun gardens, these areas tend to get overlooked. So what people need to focus on, like we've been trying to do when we replace plants with native plants, is we look for shapes and textures to add some interest to the garden. If you look up under the pine tree, you'll see a variety of shade. And when people think about a shade garden, they have to take into consideration whether it's deep shade, whether it's part sun, part shade, whether it's filtered light, and then select the native plants that work well with those light conditions. And as you've seen, under deeper, full shade, we've concentrated on adding ferns. There are actually over 30, it's about 39 varieties of native ferns. So you can have something that's like this, a sensitive fern that has a broad leaf. You could have something that has more variety, a variegated, more delicate leaf. We have Christmas fern in there. Let's see. There are several in here, interspersed.
I love the point you made that there's different types of shade. People look and say, oh, that's shady, and that's the end of it. They think that they need a shade-tolerant plant. But it's how much sun, when the sun occurs, in the morning or the afternoon sun.
Exactly.
Or if it's just shade all day.
Exactly.
And I also love the way you talk about the shapes and textures, because you're seeing some really different, I mean, obviously ferns get a really great shape, but these are pretty cool.
These are lady's mantle. If you look up further, in the middle of the garden right now, which is our work in progress, you'll see a plant right here that doesn't look like much right now, but it's called a May apple. It's very unique. Obviously, it flowers more in May, but the leaves in May are very large and umbrella-like. And if you look in May under the leaf in here, you'll see a purplish fruit, greenish fruit that resembles an apple. It's very unique, but it gives lots of nice shade for underlying plants. So if you wanted to plant something low around the May apple, you could. If you look
That's
up
really cool.
through the garden, you'll see the different light, and most people have different light degrees. At the top, we planted a hydrangea, which is more sun to part shade. That's an Annabelle, which is a native hydrangea. So you can have lots of types of flowers, but keep them in the native range. We try to go with at least, here we try, anything we put in, we try to put native. But homeowner, if they had a rule of thumb, maybe 70% native, 30% non-native, then they would feel like they would be helping the environment. Plus, really, native plants are less stress for the plant and also less stress for the homeowner.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to keep a plant alive that doesn't really belong there, it's a lot of stress to
Very
constantly
good
water,
point.
weed. But with the native plants, they're used to the soil conditions, they're used to the light conditions, and the weather and the temperature.
The amount of
So,
watering.
exactly. So if homeowners try to follow, 70% native plant rule, then I think they'll find that there's enough variety, enough texture, enough color to add interest to their garden.
Well, there's a lot of texture and color in the shade garden. This is one of my favorite gardens. And I've never seen the May apple in bloom, so I can't wait to see one in bloom. Okay, we're gonna head over here to our herb garden. This is a spiral garden. Phil is gonna tell us about this garden. Okay, so what is a spiral herb garden? It's got a very fancy name.
A spiral herb garden is really a very functional, convenient, easy way for any homeowner to have a beautiful herb garden, very attractive herb garden in their backyard. It's about 2 yards in diameter, maybe a yard high.
So it doesn't require a lot of space.
It doesn't require a lot of space. It's compact. It's attractive, and really you can put any herbs in that you like. What we've tried to do here is put herbs that generally would have been used by in the colonial times, but not exclusively, and you certainly don't have to do that. Some of these are very edible, and then others are for different purposes. And what you do, a spiral herb garden has microclimates in it. So at the top it's going to be sunny and dry, so you have things like thyme, rosemary, lavender, sage. You could put oregano in here that require very little moisture and a lot of sun. And as you come around and get lower in the garden, basil, we have basil over here, I think we have some dill, parsley, and coming around to this side where we have chives. So the lowest point in the garden, and on the north side you would put things that require less moisture and less sun. You can even, if you wanted to, have at the end of the garden, have a little pool, a frog pond, where there would even be more moisture.
That's spectacular.
A couple of other things we have in here. There's some comfrey. Comfrey is here, and calendula, and those really were used in colonial times for medicinal purposes. Some people may still use them now for ointments or for teas, but most people don't nowadays.
And is the cactus part of the spiral herb garden?
Cactus is not. No, it's just it's an attractive addition to the overall gardens we have here behind the Nature Center, but it is not related at all to this.
Okay, I love the microclimates. I think it's easy enough for people to understand. The higher up the soil is going to be more dry. The lower you get, you're going to be able to collect more moisture. They're going to get more sun up there. There's a bumblebee. Again, the garden is in action. The bumblebees are helping us out, pollinating.
And many of the herbs here are going to flower, so it's going to be attractive too. You see the calendula is flowering, the thyme is starting to flower.
And that's something I think a lot of people don't realize, is that herbs are flowers too, and they can be colorful. Again, you've got a lot of great textures in here as well. There's different shaped leaves, a lot of different colors. This is one of the coolest. I just love all the stones around it too, though. I don't know if everybody can see, but it's just a rock spiral wall that gets higher as it goes in, and then the plants are planted in there.
These were all stones that we found here at Hammonasset. You can buy bricks. You can really do it with any kind of stone you want. Stone is probably the best. It absorbs the heat during the day and retains the heat at night. So it's probably the best thing to use, but really any kind of stone can be used.
All right, great point. Okay, and you're also going to tell us about our Three Sisters garden.
So the Three Sisters garden goes back to early Native Americans, and the colonialists learned about these gardens when the settlers came. And what you have in the Three Sisters garden, you have corn, you have beans, and you have squash. And so the corn would provide the carbohydrates, the beans would provide protein, and the squash would be providing the Native Americans with other minerals and vitamins. And they do complement each other. So the corn stalks and these structures here would provide, and you don't see any beans in here right now, would provide a way for the beans to climb. And the squash would actually provide shade to keep the ground moist and keep the weeds down. There is,
I love that part.
and there is a sequence to planting this. The corn really needs to be planted first and get started, and then the beans, and then lastly you would plant the squash. And we had a little struggle this year getting the garden going because of COVID. We were late, and so everything had to go in at the same time. So we were challenged to get the beans running effectively. But if you look in here, you will find squash that has been growing. There's some pumpkins, which is in the squash family, down at this end.
So this is very different from the way most people would plant, because they would separate each crop out. But do they affect the soil differently as well, having 3 different crops in one soil patch?
So you can put them in blocks and bunches, but the benefit of putting it like this in these mounds is that the beans actually pull nitrogen from the air and provide it to the soil. So it provides the fertilizer that you need to grow the corn and the squash without amending the soil.
That's great. And where normally you would have to like constantly be rotating where you put your beans so they're adding nitrogen to the soil, this is doing it all at the same time.
Right, automatically, which you should, as a homeowner, you can be aware. If you're growing peas or beans, anything in that family, it's pulling nitrogen from the air and putting it in the soil.
There's a nice big pumpkin growing down there too. Okay, thank you, Phil. And now we're going to go to our mini meadow. Jennifer is going to tell us about the mini meadow. So first of all, what is our mini meadow?
Well, it's a combination of native grasses and flowering plants. And we wanted to, this demonstration garden is to give people an opportunity to get up personal and close to the experience of a meadow, and to also show how maybe it would look if you had a meadow in your own yard. And this is just one example of the many different types of meadows that there are.
So you said grasses, and people are always wondering what types of grasses they're able to plant.
So that was a very important decision with when we created the mini meadow, was which native grasses we would use. And one is that we recommend is the small blue stem. And it comes in, it can be true to species, or the different various cultivars out there that are native. And also there's a switchgrass here, and which the combination of the two is important, and it's that was recommended by Catherine Zimmerman, who's an expert in meadows.
Yeah, and I know both of these grow naturally here at Hammonasset.
Yes.
Although the little blue stem, we don't get as much as we really should, because we mow our parking lots, and they don't like that. But that's the area that they would like to be growing in.
Yes.
So do you have a favorite plant in the garden in this section?
I have many. No, because a meadow, unlike the other gardens you've just seen, the meadow has grasses. When you choose the flowering plants for a meadow, you really want to have aggressive plants that can stand up. And if you notice here, you'll see that there are plants that have the word, they're not weeds really, but they have the word weeds in them. And so here's and they're at different heights, and that's very important too with a meadow. You'll see that the flowers go at different heights. But over here we have an ironweed, a New York ironweed, and it's beautiful, but you can see where it's spread all through. It's a very assertive plant, which is what you want in a meadow. You have the bee balm over here, beautiful bee balm. Another assertive plant here, which has the word weed, is the butterfly weed, the Slapia.
And my college professor, I love the saying, always said, a weed is only a flower growing in a place you don't want it.
Yes, and here you want it.
So these quote unquote weeds are really desirable because of what we're trying to do here.
That's right, that's right.
All right.
And over here you can see the garden phlox. Now garden phlox is native. And you can see how it is standing up against the more assertive plants too. So that's a favorite of mine.
Very cool. Okay. I'm gonna flip the camera around here. And okay, so this was our first of our garden tours. We're going to do another garden tour tomorrow with different volunteers in different sections of the garden. Maureen said at the beginning that there are 10 different gardens here, sub-gardens. I'm not sure how you want to call it, but we're going to be going over those gardens tomorrow. So tune in at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Again, Hammonasset is open. It is a beautiful day here. There's a nice cool breeze off the water. I encourage you to come and visit. If the park is closed though, please find another state park to visit that's not as crowded as Hammonasset. We fill up pretty quickly because it's such a beautiful beach, but there are other beautiful places around Connecticut that you can visit. So I'm going to encourage you to visit CTDEEP's Instagram and check the Twitter account and find out a great place that you can visit. Until tomorrow, visiting the garden again, this is Ranger Russ from the Meigs Point Nature Center signing off.